Okay, so this one was actually linked to me by Paladin Leroy in Discord. Elden Ring open world is inspired by Shadow of the Colossus. This is a good thing. To feature varied design, dynamic enemy placements, weather cycles, and more. This is a rumor, so take whatever we're about to talk about with a grain of salt. But it's always interesting to speculate on these games, personally. I like it, at least. Elden Ring is set to be the most ambitious game ever created by From Software, but we know very little about how it will be different from the previous games created by the team. According to rumors, the world design will be the first thing that will set the game apart from the Souls series and Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. I guess Bloodborne doesn't count, unless you meant to say the Soulsborne series. Omni, who has proven in the past to have access to insider information regarding From Software, revealed earlier this month how the Elden Ring world design will be a step up the Souls series in several ways. The landscape design has been inspired by Scotland, and the open world, or rather open field as the leaker describes it, has been inspired by Shadow of the Colossus, a game that features an amazing sense of scale. Yes, it does. As a matter of fact, at one point, I need to do like a replay of that game, because I had never played through the remastered version. I only played, well, technically speaking, the version that I played was a remastered version. It's just, it was the PS3 remaster. I haven't played through the PS4 remaster. I never played it on PS2. The first time I played Shadow of the Colossus was on PS3, and it was amazing. I fucking loved it. One of the best games I ever played, like by a long shot. But anyway, so that's a very good thing. The game that features an amazing sense of scale. A lot of the elements found in this world will be dynamic and change on their own, such as enemy placements, and there will also be a day-night cycle and weather system. So this is something that they haven't really done before. Again, if this is true, remember, all of this is, you know, speculation from a rumor, etc., etc. Dynamic and change on their own. The only real dynamic content that we've had that changed, and even that was proven to have finite variations, was the Chalice dungeons in Bloodborne, because in all of the other From Software Soulsborne games, your enemies are placed statically. You have them like, no, here's the place where enemies are going to show up. Here's when they're going to attack. Here's like their leash range. All of that stuff. Everything was static, and you know what is coming by the time you get there if you've done it more than once. But yeah, such as enemy placements, there will also be a day-night cycle and weather system. Okay, this is very important, which apparently is not going to be particularly innovative. This is very important to make a distinction here, because is it an actual day-night cycle? Because you could argue, well, I mean, Bloodborne has a day-night cycle, but in reality, Bloodborne's time frame advances as the game itself advances. It's the same thing in Sekiro, and I believe this is... I don't know if the other Souls games even have something like that. I think Dark Souls 3 has something similar to that as well. As you advance in the game, the sun starts glowing brighter and whatnot. But yeah, all of this stuff is usually static in Souls games. Because yes, it does change, but it changes because you do certain things in the game that cause it to change. So it's not like, oh, time passes even if you don't do anything. Time only passes after you do stuff. Like specific key points, specific boss fights that you've done, specific events that you've triggered. So if it actually has a day-night cycle, an actual day-night cycle like we see in other open world games, that'll be a first for, you know, Miyazaki's From Software team for the Soulsborne, the post-Souls era, basically. As well as a weather system, which again is something that we didn't really have in the previous games. Elden Ring's also going to feature smaller locations in the vein of the Souls series, so variety promises to be high. All these locations will be filled with enemies, and they will be smarter than ever, coming up with elaborate strategies to kill the player. Smarter than ever could indicate that they might delay this for the next line of consoles. Could. I'm not saying it does, I'm saying it could. Because whenever you start messing around with AI, that's when you start needing more computing power. Like, one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is that the problem that we had in Blighttown in the original Dark Souls, the problem with, you know, all of the lag that you had in that game on the PlayStation 3 was the the friggin' navigation of the NPCs. It wasn't the visuals. I mean, the visuals of Blighttown were not particularly impressive. The problem was the AI was constantly trying to calculate paths to get to the player, particularly whenever you engage with multiple enemies and they have to calculate, okay, in order to get to the player who's over there, I have to climb this ladder and then go across this beam and then climb this other ladder and then, you know, drop down here. Like, the AI doing all those calculations is what was causing the lag that you had in Blighttown. So whenever they're talking about improved AI, smarter than ever, you know, smarter than any Souls game ever, you know, in order to keep up with that, you're going to need significant computational power. And at the same time, if you are talking about an open world, which is not going to be as easy to render as the traditional Souls-like levels, then yes, we could be talking about something that will be next generation only. But again, I don't know. This could all be false. I could be full of crap. I don't know. This is just the vibe I get. Coming up with elaborate strategies to kill the player. As someone who generally isn't into most of the last decades of open world AAA, especially titles, Breath of the Wild included, I would say if you're in the same boat as me, you don't really have anything to worry about in terms of how From Software is designing their open world, and it's the reason they're pivoting away from really calling it open world and moving more towards the distinction of open field, to denote a greater openness than past games have provided, while also staying away from popular and overused open world trends. Yeah, dude, nobody wants the Ubisoft game with a From Software skin. Nobody wants that, okay? Like, legit. Hell, I wish less people would do the Ubisoft game, because that's what a lot of open world games are these days. Which doesn't just mean, so we made a Dark Souls, but now areas are big enough to ride a horse through too either. But design elements and direction, especially in terms of an open world, are one of the things I plan to talk about and go more in depth with in the future. But there will be open sections as well as more corridor-like sections like past games. Omni also confirmed more recently that multiplayer will be included in Elden Ring, but he cannot say in which capacity. Multiplayer is in, but truth be told, I'm not really a multiplayer player, so I haven't really bothered to concern myself with the specifics of it. As for more detailed information, Omni is not going to share more at this time, as the game is far from being finished. Gameplay mechanics are subject to frequent changes. Far from being finished. Initially, the rumor that I had read earlier this year indicated that the game could potentially be released in June 2020. And if it's far from being finished, again, we could be seeing it push to next generation. But I don't want to make any promises that I can't keep, so while something like the landscape as a whole being inspired by Scotland or the game being inspired by Shadow of the Colossus, whether in day, night, and other general things or macro things that aren't going to change, smaller micro level stuff like every area, asset, and NPC will make it into the final game, or how certain gameplay systems work are in flux and aren't really guaranteed until the game is gold. Something that is true in January might no longer be true in May, which is why I try to avoid and would prefer not to be asked micro or hyper-specific topics like that. And you should probably be wary of anyone else that claims they do have such detailed info. Is it gonna have soul memory? Even though Omni seems reliable enough, we have to take everything with a grain of salt until we learn more of Elden Ring. These rumors paint an incredibly interesting picture, showing From Software's willingness to bring the Souls series formula to new heights. Elden Ring is currently in development for PC and console. The release window is yet to be confirmed. I'd like to see more traditional multiplayer in a Souls game. I know that that's probably not what a lot of people want to see, but I would like to see, you know, you can play it solo just like you've always done, but I would like to see the game world scale to the presence of a second player, right? Like, think for instance, right? You could have, imagine like Dark Souls and Dark Souls with Gravelord, right? Imagine that. And just imagine that the second another player comes into the world, Gravelord mode triggers, and you would have something like that in Elden Ring. But what would be cool is that the progression would happen for both players. So like, say for instance, I'm in boss 3 and I get summoned, or I join somebody. Maybe it doesn't have to be a summoning system. Maybe I don't know, somebody can ring a bell or something. I can show up. I don't know, whatever. Like a system where I can just join my friend's game. My friend is at boss 2 and I'm at boss 3. So I help him out. I go back to his world and whatever, and we just, you know, hang around. We kill some stuff. We get to boss 2. We kill boss 2, and then we continue progression. And we get to a point where, like, you know, now I'm at boss 3. And we both kill boss 3 it'd be cool if the progression counted for me as well. Or at least let me select to have that be a thing or not. Like, I think that would be interesting, because one of the things that was always kind of like a deterrent to me playing this game repeatedly with friends was that whenever you kill a boss, you got to go kill him 3 times. You got to go collect all of the items 3 times. You got to go do all of the things 3 times. You know? And as much as I freaking love Souls, like, that stuff got repetitive fast, dude. Fast. But, you know, that's just me. That's just me, dude. That's the way that I feel. That's one of the things that I would like to see in multiplayer. Naturally, I also want to see invasions, all of that stuff. And I realize that that's probably not going to be something that a lot of people want. But one of the things that I've always liked about Souls games was the fact that you could also play it in multiplayer if you wanted to. It was an option. It's still a fantastic experience if you play by yourself. I would even say it's not as great of an experience if you play it in multiplayer. It's mostly just like a fun side thing that you do when you engage in co-op, right? It's not as rewarding of an experience because, you know, as far as I'm aware, the game doesn't really scale that much. If it does scale, it's so minimal that doesn't even compensate for the fact that there's another player there. You just like, you go in there and you just mow down through everything. Sure, the bosses have more health and all that stuff, but I mean, let's face it, is it really meaningful? Right? Is it really meaningful in any of the games that the bosses have more health? Like, there might be the occasional boss that can become a bit of a nuisance due to the fact of it having more health. But at the same time, I think it would be cool if with proper scaling and with proper progression, it would be interesting to see how they would tackle that challenge.